Welcome back to another episode of Just My Baby Daddy podcast. It's your boy AJ, and today we have a topic that involves sacrifice. So, and for true transparency, a guest today that we have Mr. Kendrick Faison for the second time, but it's the first time that everybody else will be seeing this due to technical difficulties that we recorded before. And during that episode recorded before, he spoke about certain things that we really want to dive into today. And that is raising your children across state lines. There's a lot of times where it's a job or it's other things that pull you apart to the point where my kid is going to be here, but I have to be here somewhere else. And, I'm across state lines now, but it doesn't really feel that way, right? I'm in Northern Virginia. My kids are in Maryland. I go right across the bridge, but it's a quick drive. Whereas your situation was different. So just give the people a little explanation of what you were going through.
Yeah, man, AJ, thanks for having me again for the second time. Hopefully this works out. But yeah, I mean, so we both went to Fayetteville State University. While I was at Fayetteville State, I had a unique opportunity when I was in a junior college to be asked to come and work for a government agency from undergrad, and that was automatic, right? That, it's very hard for you. This is like my junior year, and so that opportunity was here in Washington D.C. I had opportunity to come here and intern twice before I went to graduate school. But even before then, plans always ready to come to D.C. This was an agency that you just can't apply for. You could apply, but I mean, this was like carte blanche, and so I had already had my oldest daughter. I think my son was maybe a year old because I think when I graduated, I had my son. And so what I decided, I deferred coming, and I went to graduate school. I went to grad school in Kentucky to Murray State, and had another kid. So I had 3 kids, walking myself into a federal government job. This job was very intense. It wasn't it was in the intel community, so it was not your regular Joe Schmo type government gig. And so, but it was an opportunity of a lifetime. And so I decided to, go to graduate school, now having 2 kids. But I understood I grew up without having any of my parents. And I had a grandmother who worked at a plant back home who I knew I didn't want to follow that. I saw our struggles. And I knew I went to school. I had already went to graduate school, but I had 2 kids, right? And so it was a sacrifice and the relationship with their mother was not like a long-term relationship either, right? And so for me, it was like, what's this long-term goal? And so I decided to, come to DC. We tried our best to, as a father, because I didn't grow up with my brothers. I was kind of like the only child. So I always promised myself that I would work the hardest to, come down. And then it was aha moment, like, hey, dog, you can't keep driving down North Carolina every other weekend because it's taxing, right? Cost of living in DC is very expensive. It costs a lot to travel. Then, my grandmother, we didn't really have a house like that anymore. So like to stay at people's houses, that started to get weird. And then my kids started to get older, and they started to, it was good when they were younger, but by the time my kids got to middle school and to high school, things changed. But it was a taxing. I mean, like, even now, my daughter is at Howard University. My son is at Fayetteville State. My oldest daughter is doing her thing. So, sometimes your plan is better than God's plan is better than your plan, because it's a couple of times when I was just having a conversation with my brother today about he's not having, when your kids get older type thing. But it's just hard. I mean, it's always hard. I remember when I was would like fly to Raleigh to see my daughter and have to leave her with her mother. I just wanted to be a father, but I also understood that from a financial perspective and long-term perspective, it'll be, being a daddy is good, but being able to ensure that when I'm gone, that my kids financially can sustain themselves is more important. And I think sometimes in being a parent and a father, the Bible says, a wise man leaves a heritage for his children's children. And sometimes we still have to be a father. So there was never any time that, and I always say this, and I believe this, AJ, was that there has not been but maybe 1 or 2 times where I've tried not to be there for the milestone events. Maybe I'm not there for, when the baby was sick, or maybe their first day walking in class, but the milestone events, because I always wanted to, I didn't grow up with my dad, and I always, looked around and say to see where my father was at. So it was always a sacrifice. And I think in parenthood, and I also, respect my kid's mother. I think and I have three people ask me to say, how many moms you got? I got three. And so, but I applaud them because I wanted them to have something I didn't have. And again, I didn't grow up with my mother. And so I thought it was more important for my children to also have the family surrounding them where, my side is just me, my grandmother, and my mother, my grandmother, and me, rather than them having a whole slew of family around them as they grow. So, it was a lot of sacrifice, a lot of important things that had to happen. But we're now here at pivotal moment in their lives. And I think it's not good, but it ain't bad either.
So, do you think they understood that, especially your oldest ones now? Do you think they understood that, or do you feel as though, yeah, but you should have been here, type of thing?
Yeah, it's one thing I've always told my kids. I never lied to them, right? And so we've had the hard conversations. I've never cowered down. I mean, there's been times my oldest daughter, most definitely was like, "Hey, you should have been here. Um, you weren't here, to kind of be here for us." And sometimes as a man, you got to take that on the chin, and that I think in business and the way you do things is always a sacrifice, right? And so I've always been prayerful for my children to ensure that they were, well taken care of, making sure I keep my hands on, making sure that, nothing majorly was going wrong. Still paying, as you know, the good thing, child support. So financially being there and working as I was sacrificed. But, when I, retrospecting back, everybody wants the white picket fence. But
Yeah.
what I've learned, AJ, and hanging out with some of my friends who have both parents, most of them, some of them are in jail, some of them in prison, some of them on drugs. So I don't think there's a recipe, that there's no book of a perfect family, because what happens when you have kids and you get divorced? You have a split home. What happens when a dad dies and you have a stepfather? So there's a lot of pieces in this thing we call makeup of a family. Um, but I would just honestly say, damn, man, I have three of the best children in the world, and I wouldn't take anything for them. Even from where they've been. I mean, I think they're more solid. If they get together now, if I put my three kids on this thing together, they joking, laughing, and having a good time. So I've learned to you know ensure that they had some type of religious relationship, and also I always talk every time I talk to my kids. I say make sure you talk to your kids, but then I also say something that my grandmother taught me to understand the conversation of death. And as my kids are now getting older, there will be a day that daddy ain't here. And so it's so important that you can't put the blame on me or saying, hey, I wish. There will be a day I'm not here. So I think it's more important to, take more of the pressure off me and really focus on y'all, because there will be a day that y'all have to sustain yourself and maintain yourself. And so we've had just different approaches of it. My son, we've had conversations, my baby daughter, we've had conversations. But like I've said, I try my best, and I promise my kids to never lie to them, and see where the chips lie from the process.
So to piggyback on a couple of things you spoke on there, one of them is that conversation with your daughter about you should have been there. I remember now my kids are young, right? And my daughter was, I know I've said it on here before. I think she may have been what, 4 or 5. It was one time I was about to leave because I don't live there, and I was about to leave the house, and but I was actually staying there that night, and I was putting her to bed or something, and she didn't want me to leave out the room, and she was like, "You're going to leave because you always leave," and that's tough, right? I mean, I did. I broke down when I got late because that was my first time experiencing that, hearing that. So when you experience and hear that, how do you deal with that? Do you talk with your daughter through it, or do you just take it on the chin, suck it up, and be like, yeah, you're right.
I think it's some of both, right? Even when I was younger, right? So in the last 10 years, my brother lives in Fayetteville. So I would bring my kids to my brother's house, and hey, maybe I'll go out, right? Because your kids got to understand, and I think as they get older, like my kids now, we've had this conversation like, Dad, like we really just want you to come and spend the night with us. I'm like, well, you know, I still got another life, right? I know that, I can't, when you're asleep, you go sleep. I mean, what I'm gonna do? Sleep beside you? Or something like, I'm there, and that sounds kind of crazy, but it's true. And
It's
so
reality. Yeah.
I think I had a conversation with my son just recently. He was like, Dad, I get it. Because my kids are 26, 23, and 21. So I don't have kids anymore. I have adults. And I think once you get past that 20 hump, like, not, I ain't their best friend, but I most definitely have more reasonable conversations about a lot more things that I probably would have had with them when they were adolescents, right? But yeah, I mean, I think those times do suck, right? When I had to drop them off and drive back. I mean, there've been times when I cried and felt bad because I know how I felt when I looked around and my dad wasn't there or my mother wasn't there. So, but I think there's a thing called repair of the breach, right? So I've just vowed to myself, in my days that I have now, is to ensure that you can't make up. My grandmother always told me you can't buy love. So I'm not in a position to buy love with any of my children. But what I am also trying to do is to ensure that I'm instilling them love, making sure that they're well taken care of. Because at one time I didn't have the funds, I didn't have that capability to be able to be that on time dad, right? So when it comes to child support, people knock on it, but that's sacrifice, and so you have one end of the spectrum that can do the special and can do and pie and whatever. When you can't buy, you can't do it. So I mean, there's been a lot of times, like I tell you, that stress and that financial stress was also tough, but not being there, I mean, it sucked. I mean, I can't even lie to you. I think it's on every man to want to be there and to, see my son hit his first ball and take my daughter to a daddy daughter event. But I will also ensure the brothers, man, just live long enough, and there'll be a day that God will bless you enough financially if you do right that you'll be able to do that. But not only just for you, but your children. And like I stress now that on my kids, like, can you give me a grandkid? And my kids don't want that. And I think that's the dope part of being a grandparent that you see in your grandparents is that the things that most of your grandparents failed on as a parent to your parents, they made up for their grandparents. And so I think for me, I see it that way that maybe I'll be the best papa in the world, but that's how I look at it is that you have to make up that time, and you can be a repair to breach, right? And so now I look at it now as I'm waiting so feverishly for my grandkids, but show love to my kids and prayerfully that that we'll get it. And I know they have some distaste. I mean, I would. I mean, I had some internal distaste for not having my mom and my dad there, but why would I wallow in my sorrow, right? I mean, you gotta pick yourself up and go on because this life thing don't slow down, it don't pause, and it damn sure don't stop. And if it stops, you ain't here no more. So yeah, we're just trying to figure this out.
So to the fact of you not having your parents, do you think that made it easier or harder to make the decisions that you made?
I would absolutely say harder because there's no compass. I was just talking to my son about some crypto and some investment yesterday. And I was like, damn, like I know now enough to be able to tell my kid like what's the right decision. And I didn't have that. But I'm not saying I didn't have it. I didn't have it through my parents. I was blessed to have, if you guys don't know, Dr. Harrington at Fayetteville State University is like my father. So I've had surrogates. I've had, women in my family who stood up when my mother wasn't there. But it's still not the same, right? It's still not a person that birthed you and really understand where you're going. But I thank God that, I was able to, for a man like Brooks Harrington to see who I was and I say this all the time, I am not the person, I'm not professional, I'm not the CEO, I'm not the person that I am now without Brooks Harrington and most definitely not having the ability to walk on the campus of Fayetteville State University to meet him. Right. And so I think it's hard. I mean, I think not having a parent in one vein is a plus and also a minus. There's a lot of stuff that I personally don't do because my parents did, right? And so, I think it goes both ways. I think it's a learning tool for most of us that sometimes, sometimes what you think your dad is doing is super positive, but many times I just recently, just last week, went to a court case, man, and it sat in a room and saw so many young brothers in there going to court by themselves, right? And I was like, I walked out there and I said, thank you, God, man, because my children, I haven't had the luxury to do that for my children, right? And so, regardless of what's happening, my kids are not in that situation. And so, my kids could be in that situation, but I'm solid enough to know that both their mothers and myself have allowed them to see. Because even though you're absent from your children, I'll go back to what you said. My children have seen nothing but positive, right? They know they daddy, but they also know how hard I go. I've always tried to, stay above the frail and presented myself in a particular way professionally. And that's all my kids have seen. So I think that's important too. As a man think it, so shall it be, right? And so the way that you present yourself to your children, the way you carry yourself towards a relationship with their parents, right? So there have been times when I most definitely didn't agree with their mothers, but I didn't purposely. I don't think I've dogged their mothers ever in front of their kid, my kids, right? There may be some disagreements and stuff, and I may not talk to them, right, as we gotten older, but I don't. That's stuff that men have to understand, regardless, right? Is that it's a presentation, and it's a presentation of what your kids want to see about you. And I think the biggest litmus test about this is when you die, right? When you're away from them, like how they gonna drive this ship when you're away.
So I do have another question. When you're not there and they're in different places, how are you maintaining, helping the facilitation of their relationship? Because it's easy, easier for the kids to all get together and be at daddy's house, right? But when there's no daddy's house, where do the kids go? How does that
Yeah,
work?
yeah. I mean, I've always so when I started to have kids, I call this thing Daddy Day. And so we figure this thing out. There's been times that I go to my daughter's dance recital. There's been times that my oldest daughter, I'll pick her up and we'll go somewhere. I think my oldest daughter probably got the less of the stick because she was older. But, we've gone to baseball games. We've gone to movie theaters. We've gone to family outings, family reunions, right? So, I mean, there hasn't been times. I mean, you got to be creative. I mean, we didn't have, I don't have a compound. I don't have an estate back home where my kids can go and play just like I'm saying, that's not given to me. Even now, I mean, I wouldn't say that for long, but we will have a place. We will have a place of sanctity that, if they want to come, they can come. That's happening real soon. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, you gotta be super creative. Sometimes it's good to just be in this place and then leave, right? Then you got to drive back or fly back, right? I mean, it's a tough pill to swallow when again you don't have the family makeup. You can just go and I appreciate my brother because my brother lives in Fayetteville and we've kind of made my brother home the place where we meet and we hang out and study, right? So I appreciate my brother not only and his wife not stepping up even when I'm not there. Like my son goes to my brother's house. My daughter's going to my brother. My daughter actually stayed with my brother when I used to work for FEMA because I was on the road so much. So it takes a family, and I like I said, I appreciate my brother Jerome and my sister-in-law Marie for standing the gap for me, right? So, and that was important too because I wanted to make sure that they can see a family life on the other side of me, and they've been able to do that through my brother and my sister-in-law.
Yeah, that is something that's important because, it's so many times we had people come on here and be like, yeah, my dad got kids. And it's like, well, you mean your brothers, your sisters? And that gets lost a lot. It's so often we hear that on here.
Yep. Yeah, and my cousins. I mean, we believe in no one. We don't call each other cousins. We call each other uncles and aunts, right? And so
Right.
we just have a different approach with that, right? And so my oldest brother also steps in with my kids, and they said my kids. And this is crazy. My kids will go to my brothers before they come to me. I'm very stern and like white. I'm great. I don't do white and black. Like I'm great. So tell me what it is. Don't give me no fluff, whatever. And sometimes they'll go to my brother and then it gets turned back to me, right? So that's the kind of the funny part of my
Relationship.
kid, the relationship. Yeah, they'll most definitely go to my brothers before they come to me.
But that's a great thing to have, though, right? Because that means they have people that they can rely on, just like they have you. So that's an amazing thing to have. So one more thing about it: if you had to give advice to a father that is looking to make that move, or has, let's say, a job that's thinking about putting them away, what would you say to that father?
You got to strategize. I never saw where I'm at today, right? So I'm a CEO of a major government contracting firm with
Yeah.
employees, right? But had I not, right? And I use that analogy a lot. Had I not, right? But I saw the vision. I saw the vision, but I didn't know where the vision will land. And I think that's important. Moving here to go to work at McDonald's or working at Walmart or Radio Shack may not make no sense. But I think a job versus a career. I think when you got to realize that regardless of the child support, so you go 0 to 18, 0 to 21, right? Sometimes in our mind, brothers, we like, oh man, when they get 18, they're on their own. That ain't the case. The bigger case is when their mother and you can't provide and you got to provide for real. Because the court say you got to provide, but when it stops, how are you going to be able to ensure that you can pay for a wedding, that you can pay for tuition, that you can pay for a house, you can pay for those things? And so, um, I would say you got to strategize. You got to really look at numbers, right? You got to look at saying, hey, if I'm making 40,000 in North Carolina, I can make $80,000, and hell, if the mom take 20, 50% of that for 18 years, there will be a day that I can make 100% of that, and that 100% I can save and do whatever I want to do with it. Um, but I think it's a long game. I think you can't just think about like, hey, I can stay in North Carolina, or I can stay in Missouri, or I can stay in St. Louis or Atlanta and just, you know, get by to get by. I mean, that's not the way this life works. And I think the older you get, the more financially savvy you have to get, and the more you got to really think about the long game. An old person says the rope behind you is longer than the rope in front of you. And but I'm 44, right? But I also believe that it's important that I made the right decisions, and I see it now, right? I didn't see it like 2 or 3 years ago. Absolutely, I didn't. I didn't see that it made sense for me to come to Maryland. Why would I come to Maryland? Cost of living is so much. I'm struggling to, light bills, can't pay the insurance, can't do that. But there's a date, and that day has come, right? And now financially, that had I not took the path I've had, because there's a thing in careers, and I mentor a lot of people, and I talk to them about careers, right? Career is different. Um, it's like a rabbit. Like you hop in here, then you hop into here to get better than this, then to get better than this, and get better than this. There's a parable in the Bible that speaks about beneath, right? So it goes down this family lineage. I think that's the same way in careers. Like you start off as making 40,000, then you somewhat become a manager, then you become a supervisor, then you become a director, then you become or whatever, right? And so that progression also helps you in life, right? So outside of you working, it teaches you leadership, organizational skills, and those things that you can then, if you embody all that stuff that you learn, you can lift that up and then start your own company or start your own business or learn how to invest in other companies and those type of things. But if you just stay status quo and just stay at that mediocre stage, it's gonna be very hard for you, and especially brothers who have a lot of kids, right? I got 3 kids, and kids cost a lot of money. So if you got 9, 10, 11 kids, I mean, you gonna have to.
You need to go to the doctor, bro. You got to get that snip. You got 10 kids. You got to get that snip.
Listen, I can't speak with nobody else, but I know what that's for. I'm done. I'm officially done. It's over. No, but yeah, it's a wrap for me. But no, honestly, I think that if I had to give any advice, man, just pray about it. Be very strategic about it. Have the one thing I didn't have is a conversation with their mothers. I think we were just so at an enroll that we didn't understand. Like I felt like they were like George Floyd to me. Like they knee on my neck, and I was like, I'm like that. Like I'm Deion Sanders, and I use Deion for, I'm him, right? You really know I'm him. Like regardless of what you back then, I'm him, and so you can help me be him, or you can see him at the tail end. And so I tell a lot of brothers too, if you get that situation where you feel there's not support, like keep pressing. There will be a time when that situation and those relationships and people will mature, right? Especially when your kids get older. There is no like, well, you got to talk to me to get to your kids. No, you don't. Those are your kids, right? But here's the thing: your kids got to want to do that, right? And so you still got to kick that relationship with your kids so that you're not that guy that like. Because I know I have friends now that kids don't talk to them. Kids are like blocking them. Kids are not responding to them. So even though you can do all you want, I still believe that there's got to be a relationship. There's got to be this uh this strategy, right? So can I make sure my relationship with my kids are cool? Can I make sure that they ain't no drama at my job and my driving license ain't getting suspended because I ain't paying my child support? And do I got to go to court with this, right? Because as an employer, like that's like a no-no. So those things you can't have. But then seeing you're never gonna get rid of your kid's mother. I mean, there's weddings, there's funerals, there's graduations, the family reunion, those type of things. You're not gonna get rid of the lady you had a kid with. So pretty much you might well just get used to that. But the key thing overall is to ensure, in the long run, that your kids are gonna be okay, and that's your responsibility. You are a father, you're a dad, and God gave you that responsibility to ensure, regardless of what all the things I just talked about, is important. that those children are well maintained and have that support system. And I think that's key. I know I went on a long rant, but
Yeah, yeah,
that,
but so before I let you, there's one more part I do want to ask because, and this is something that happens with a lot of men. I don't want to just generalize, but it does, right? When we get into this situation where we talk about financial this, financial that, making sure we're set up financially for the kids, and we'll take this job for the money for the kids, and but at what point do we think about the emotional impact, and how do you weigh that? Is that because the emotional impact that it has on the kids, and how do you deal with the emotional impact that it has for you? Because like me, for example, right, I am professionally doing much better than I've ever done, and I'm bringing in, like, I can go outside and I can start up a type of car that I couldn't see myself driving before, right? But I wake up and I in this house, and I wake up, I don't have my 3 kids in it. So I would get rid of my car for my kids any day of the week. That balance part. So at what point do you think about that, or is that just that will figure itself out?
yeah, I think so. We have a family chat, right? And so it's the small things. I think it helps when you don't lose communication with your kids or that touch point. And I think when fathers do that, it's very hurtful, right? So when you can't pick up the phone or you can't FaceTime, I think now having a child is probably more important or more accessible than ever because you can, you know, now if you even have an Android or iPhone, there's opportunities for you to FaceTime your kid.
Sure.
There's opportunities, like I said, to be there for the milestone events because from a day to day perspective, like I mean, my kids, I just talked to my kids today, right? Like, okay, but I'm so and it's those like weekend moments and those birthdays and those monumental moments are very important and then it's also when there are issues, right? So my oldest daughter called me about issues with a guy. My oldest daughter is at school and I'm like, what we doing over there, how, right? And my son is like, we having these conversations about what he's having at Fayetteville State. So I think being available for that. But I also would say to brothers, man, be vulnerable to yourself, man. I'm around a circle, a lot of brothers who got kids, and we have conversations. And I think iron sharpens iron at the very most, right? And so uh, some people are Muslim, some people are Christian, but I believe that there is a thing in faith, right? Ever since my oldest daughter was 2, so I didn't get the opportunity, but I prayed over my children. I pray over my children. Um, I I I petition God for my kids, right? Even though I'm not there, I ask for a hedge of protection. I pray. I make sure that sometimes I check in with their mothers or have folks to check in to make sure my kids are okay, right? Or people will relay stuff back to about my children. Um, I think it's an emotional. I think that this person has a part of you. You're 50% of this person. And so it's not like a doll that you can just let go and figure it out. This person carries your name, like my oldest daughter is my twin. So when people go see her, regardless of in a good position or a bad position, she holds my likeness. My other 2 kids have my last name. And I tell them all the time, you carry the last name of Faison particularly. And so you not only represent yourself, but you represent me. And so I think that's another, from an emotional perspective. But then the crazy part about it, I am their father. And so how dare me to go out and be, this reprimanded man and doing all these crazy things and still get in front of my kids and say, hey, why don't you just be this respectful person, right? And so I think there's an emotional seesaw approach where sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And sometimes you have to be a dad, you have to be stern. But what I've learned is also you got to be a soft. And so in these latter years of my kids getting older, I have this whole policy. I used to be like, you're going to do what I told you to do. These kids are not robots. They're not like, you can't beat anything into a child, right? You can code something, but and I think there's a sense of discipline, right? So I don't want brothers to be so emotional that they take it out on their kids, they take it on their mothers. If you put your hand on their mother, it's a whole different. You are no longer that warm fuzzy. It's like a tape recorder. I tell people that in life, your life is like a tape recorder. You're blank, and the more you play onto it, it gets recorded in this thing called brain. And so you have this when you come out, you're the fluffy daddy. But as the tape cassette goes on in life to your kids, you become the dad that didn't show up, the dad that talk crazy about my mama, the dad that say we ain't got no money for Christmas. And so that plays on. I think you talked about earlier, like how do you fix that? That goes on. That's that emotional approach for your kids. As they go on, they see other kids and other families, other relationships, and that used to come back to me because my kids would be around their dads and their moms, and it would be this blended family, right? But now my kids now see they've gotten older and they've seen like there's more subjects to this this equation of life, right? And so they kind of see things like my dad ain't really as bad as I thought he was, right? When I was younger, I thought he was an asshole, right? But now, yeah, I got a hero over here, right? And so I think as you as time goes on, I think you could do either one thing. You can make it worse or you can make it better. But I think the longer you go, the more you undergird your kids with love and understanding and guidance and care. I think your kids will kind of figure out you're not this big boogeyman that some people may have told them you are. I think they'll figure that out as well. But there is an emotional thing in this therapy. There's counseling. There's things that you can do as a family that will help as well. But I really think it's just important to ensure that you're honest, right? And like I said, sometimes your kid's gonna tell you some stuff that you ain't gonna want to hear. And there's gonna be some stuff you're gonna know about your kids that you don't want to know. But it's telling you should love your kids because nobody's gonna love them better than two people, their mother and you.
That's perfect. And your son, you said your son's at Fayetteville State.
Yes, he is.
I hope to see
Legacy.
him on the Kappa line in the spring.
The devil is alive. The devil is alive. Devil.
I will be seeing him in the spring.
Look, we got an AKA Howard. She done broke the mold, so I don't know. My son is I'm trying to get him to go pie chapter so bad, but it ain't working. So if he ain't going pie, he ain't nothing. I'm telling Delta, I'm Delta Xi, Delta Gamma, Epsilon Zeta, EB. He got bad grading. He a bad person. Don't even let him on your line. He ain't gonna do nothing for you.
Oh
So
God.
nah, he's doing excellent. He's a 3.8 GPA student. My daughter's a 3.9 student. As you guys, and one of the things I'll tell this, right, with my son, like my son did not want to go to Fayetteville State. And he said that, he said, I don't want to follow behind you. You know how powerful that is for your kids to say they don't want to follow behind you, that you had put the bar up so high. But what's really crazy? Regardless of what I did at Fayetteville State, he's doing his own thing. And he's excelling the way he wants to. He has the friends he wants to have. He came to me the other day at homecoming, last year at homecoming. He said, Dad, like, I not understand this family thing Joe got at Fayetteville State, right? It's different. It's a different approach, right? And so it's just good, man, like to see my daughter see, so I have my son at Fayetteville State, but I have my daughter at Howard, both HBCUs. One is in the Divine Nine, one is just a regular Joe. And just to see, and then my oldest daughter is now she's in her career field. She loves what she does. And I say this, you know what makes me feel good as a dad? To know every day that my son is at Fayetteville State doing his thing, my daughter's at Howard, my oldest daughter is doing her thing. There ain't nobody in jail, there ain't nobody in the hospital, and ain't nobody dead. And so, you know what gives me the gall to say, hey, I'm cool, and emotionally, like you said, like as that emotional high or that emotional feel that gives you that balance, to know that all three of my children are good, what more can I live for, man? But to just make sure they good, right?
All right. I mean, that's the perfect way to end there. Perfect way to end right there. I
Mhm.
appreciate your time, man.
I appreciate you. And listen, don't let this get deleted. But dads, listen, dads, I would just end with this. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Like you're a human, you're not a robot. You have feelings, things get to you. Sometimes you're gonna need help financially, sometimes you're gonna need help spiritually. Sometimes we are flawed beings, right? And so at anything, there is no there is nothing perfect in life. Nothing. So understand your imperfection, being imperfected, not being perfect, and knowing how to drive through success, because success leaves clues, and the biggest success in life is a person to ask for help. So
All right. There we go. Appreciate it.
appreciate it.
episode of Just My Baby Daddy podcast. I know you like what you saw. So what I need for you to do is go back and look at past episodes. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share our YouTube page, Just My Baby Daddy Podcast. And you can follow us on all social media at Just My Baby Daddy Pod.